yang biasa nggak masuk.
Masuk juga semua. Semua channel TVRI Bali termasuk masuk dia.
Mungkin punya tinggal di TVRI.
TVRI Bali tinggal masuk. Bali masuk.
Nanti kalau kelar buka YouTube.
33 mangrove species and around hundreds of animal species in this forest. Indeed. Indeed, mangrove is very important for Indonesia. We have the world's largest mangrove area, that is 3.36 million hectares, and that is 23% of the world's total mangrove area, with 157 mangrove species across the country. Excellencies, in addition to hosting a wealth of biodiversity, this park hosts a number of sites of special religious and cultural importance. Excellencies, behind you is a Hindu temple that is called Pura Luhur Candi Narmada, and the building next to it is called Kongco Dwipayana, or Ling Simao, and the existence of different worship places in one area is quite common in Indonesia. It stands to our long-held value that is unity in diversity, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika.
Fish pond. And 20 years ago, we planted with mangrove, the result like this, 1,300 hectares. Yeah. 26 years ago.
Excellencies, this is called beji. Beji is a tradition of Bali, that is the water conservation. Water conservation is extremely important, not just for the environmental sustainability, but the well-being of the community. Excellencies, now we are walking down the ellipse. And here comes the exciting part of the visit. We are going to plant mangroves together. Excellency, planting mangroves together signifies our collective commitment to address climate change and as well as restore and preserve the environment. This is a historic moment in line with the G20 vision to recover together, recover stronger. Excellencies, President of Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Joko Widodo, will move down the ellipse together. Sorry.
More than 500 species around the world.
Yes. And they do.
Morning, Excellency.
Morning.
Fine.
Sorry, Madam.
Oh,
You
thank
go
you.
ahead and lead us.
Yes, lead us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Excellencies, we are now planting the mangroves together. Welcome. His Excellency Joko Widodo take his position at the center and follow the G. Sorry, excuse me. followed by the G20 Troika, President of Italy on the left and Prime Minister of India on the right. And the other head of states, kindly please choose the plants that are closest to you. Excellencies, this signifies our collective commitment to address climate change as well as restore and preserve the environment. This is a historic moment in line with the G20 vision to recover together, recover stronger. Excellencies, please lift the seed bag while holding the rope. Then, kindly place the seed bag into the prepared hole. Allow the rope to hit the ground. We have also prepared a number of shovels should your excellencies wish to fill the hole with soil.
Betul, Komandan. Dari Bu Erni, lambung dia.
Your Let us commemorate this special moment by taking a photo together. Excellencies, we may now proceed to the tour of the mangrove forest. Welcome to our mangrove forest. Along this wooden track, you may immerse yourself in the beauty of nature and the lush that is our green forests.
You have a great sound system.
We try our best.
More than your best.
Excellencies, mangroves play such an important role in sustaining ecosystem productivity. By supplying nutrients to the ecosystem and also providing shelter and nurseries for fish and other water species, mangrove can also store 4 to 5 times more carbon and even up to 12 times more carbon than our terrestrial forests. Then, yes, 12 times. Hence, having mangrove can contribute significantly in addressing climate change and, of course, achieving net zero emission. That is our shared goal. In addition, this mangrove park is also used for educational purposes and leisure and ecotourism service for the tourists and the local community. So 20 years ago, this was just a fish pond, an aquaculture. But together with the government and the local community, we have turned this into a 1,300 hectares of mangrove forest. 300 hectares. And that is only in this forest. Also, there's 33 different mangrove species only in this forest. 33.
But we have around 150 species, different species
Of mangroves, yes.
but here only 33.
And even in other places, such as in Papua, the mangrove would look different and they would be much bigger. And of course, it's going to be much older and live up to 100 years.
Ada mundur atau duluan atau mundur, terserah.
Excellency, this is the Bali Mangrove Nursery for sustainable mangrove management. This nursery plays an important role in supporting Indonesia to achieve its target to rehabilitate 600,000 hectares of mangrove forests across the country. And every year, this nursery only produces 6 million mangrove seedlings, comprising of 15 species, including those that are in the red list or in the endangered species category. Excellencies, in front of us is the open growth area dedicated for further tending till the seedlings are ready for field planting. Along with our efforts to rehabilitate 600,000 hectares of mangrove forest, we're also working very hard to rehabilitate 6 million hectares of degraded land. Indonesia's tropical rainforest has now reached 125 million hectares. These significant efforts are realized, among others, by establishing nursery centers in various regions of Indonesia. With a production capacity of 10 to 15 million seeds per year per nursery centers. These are efforts of collaboration between community and government, supported by our government's policies that are made not just for today, but for my generation and the generations to come.
Cepat buka telepon aja, teleponnya dibuka dulu, telepon narik untuk buat sticknya ini.
Excellencies, we trust that you have taken a closer look at our different mangrove species and seedlings at the open growth area. Now, we would love to show you of our germination house. The wild building that is behind me is the germination house that is designed for seeds germination and tends around 63,000 seeds until the seedlings are ready to be transferred into an open area. Excellencies, the white building in front of you is our germination house. This is designed for seed and seedlings germination that tends around 63,000 seedlings. And we are keeping it here until they are ready in the open growth area. production house, you can see the empowered local community prepare the planting and filling media into polytube poly bags using a mixture of cocoa peat and topsoil.
Sorry, live. Sorry, live.
Excellency, behind me is the office, serving as the control room for the production house, germination house, and the open growth area. Excellencies, Excellencies, kindly follow me as we proceed back to the Watila, the place where we start. Excellencies, we have arrived at the end of Excellencies, we have arrived at the end of our tour that will hopefully leave a meaningful and a lasting impression. I hope you have enjoyed the tour around Ngurah Rai Grand Forest Park. Thank you very much and have the most beautiful day. Ah, thank you so much. Lovely meeting you. Thank you. Can I have one photo with you, sir? One photo with you. Thank you. Have a beautiful day. Excellencies, we have now arrived at the end of our visit, which hopefully will leave a meaningful and a lasting impression. We hope you have enjoyed the tour.
saya ingin menyatakan kita siap menerima tamu-tamu G20.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. We will start launching of the pandemic fund very shortly. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Launching of the pandemic fund will be started very shortly. Thank you.
Oke, biar pada cepat tuh. Oke ya. Udah ada Indonesia Raya ya, Pak. Siap.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is a distinct privilege for me to be Master of Ceremony for today's G20 launching of the Pandemic Fund at the Mulia Resort, Bali. I, Karvina Widyopalupi from Ministry of Finance of Indonesia, would like to extend a very warm welcome to the President of Indonesia, Bapak Joko Widodo, Minister of Finance of Indonesia, Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati, Minister of Health of Indonesia, Bapak Budi Gunadi Sadikin, U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, Mrs. Janet Yellen, Minister of Economy and Finance of Italy, Mr. Giancarlo Giorgetti, Vice Minister of National Health Commission of the People's Republic of China, Professor Xiao Zuotao, Secretary of Ministry of Health and Family Welfare of India, Mr. Rajesh Bhushan, President of World Bank Group, Mr. David Malpass, Director General of the WHO, Mr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, Deputy Director General for Economic and Financial Affairs, European Commission, Ms. Elena Flores-Gual, World Bank Managing Director of Operation, Mr. Axel van Trotzenberg, and Co-Chair of the Pandemic Fund, Dr. Khatib Basri. Om Swastiastu, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to the G20 launching of the Pandemic Fund here at the Mulia Resort, Nusa Dua, Bali. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for accepting the invitations, and we appreciate that you're taking time of your busy schedules to join us this afternoon. Strengthening the global health architecture has been a key priority issue for Indonesia's G20 presidency. The new Financial Intermediary Fund, or FIF, for pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response, or PPR, has been officially established and named the Pandemic Fund. I am delighted to welcome you all to this monumental event that represents our shared collective efforts to address the fault lines and financing gaps in the pandemic PPR. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now start the event with a virtual keynote speech and launching of the Pandemic Fund by the President of Indonesia, Bapak Joko Widodo. Please use channel 1 provided on the table for English interpretation. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Yang saya hormati para Menteri Kabinet Indonesia Maju, yang saya hormati para Menteri Keuangan negara-negara G20, dan yang saya hormati para pemimpin organisasi-organisasi internasional, para delegasi, para undangan dan hadirin yang saya muliakan. Kepada para delegasi yang hadir langsung di Bali, saya menyampaikan selamat datang di Indonesia dan terima kasih atas kehadirannya. Terima kasih pula kepada para undangan yang hadir secara virtual di acara ini. 3 tahun terakhir, kita menghadapi disrupsi terberat dalam seabad terakhir, pandemi COVID-19. Telah terbukti bahwa dunia tidak siap menghadapi pandemi. Dunia tidak mempunyai arsitektur kesehatan yang andal untuk mengelola pandemi. Oleh karena itu, kita harus memastikan ketahanan komunitas internasional dalam menghadapi pandemi. Pandemi tidak boleh lagi memakan banyak korban jiwa. Pandemi tidak boleh lagi meruntuhkan sendi-sendi perekonomian global. Dengan semangat itulah, presidensi Indonesia di G20 terus mendorong penguatan arsitektur kesehatan global untuk mewujudkan sistem kesehatan global yang lebih andal terhadap krisis, serta lebih inklusif dan berkeadilan. Untuk itu, dalam jangka pendek ini, pertama, dunia harus mempunyai kapasitas pembiayaan untuk mencegah dan menghadapi pandemi. Yang kedua, membangun ekosistem kesehatan yang tersinergikan lintas negara. Hadirin yang berbahagia, perihal pembiayaan dibutuhkan sebesar 31,1 miliar dolar Amerika Serikat setiap tahunnya untuk membiayai sistem pencegahan, persiapan, dan respon terhadap pandemi di masa yang akan datang. Ini hasil studi yang dilakukan Bank Dunia dan Organisasi Kesehatan Dunia awal tahun ini. Untuk itu, G20 telah sepakat untuk membentuk dana pandemi bagi kepentingan pencegahan, persiapan, dan respon terhadap pandemi. Saya menyampaikan terima kasih kepada para donor dari negara-negara anggota G20 dan non-G20, serta dari lembaga-lembaga filantropi yang telah memberikan kontribusi. Namun, dana yang terkumpul masih belum mencukupi. Saya mengharapkan dukungan yang lebih besar lagi untuk dana pandemi ini. Selain kontribusi dana, saya mengajak semua pihak untuk mendukung beberapa inisiatif, antara lain pembentukan platform koordinasi penanggulangan darurat kesehatan, berbagai data genom internasional untuk mendukung pemantauan patogen, pengembangan jaringan digital secara global, serta sertifikasi vaksin untuk memfasilitasi keamanan perjalanan internasional dan pembentukan pusat penelitian dan manufaktur yang lebih adil dan merata. Sekali lagi saya menyampaikan terima kasih atas kontribusinya untuk dana pandemi. Dan dengan mengucap bismillahirrahmanirrahim, saya luncurkan dana pandemi hari ini. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Santi 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 Om.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now move to the next agenda. A welcoming remark from Minister of Finance of Indonesia. We would like to invite to the podium Minister of Finance of Indonesia, Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati. To Ibu Sri Mulyani, stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Excellencies, my colleague Ministers of Finance as well as Minister of Health, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to all of you from a different part of the world. Good afternoon, good evening. We are meeting today in a hybrid format, showing that although the world has yet to return to complete normality, it is recovering and keep also improving. For all of you who are able to join us here in person, I do hope that you are enjoying our hospitality in Bali, the island of God, that also provide you with hopefully a little bit more refreshing from your very, very, I'm sure, busy schedule back home. Thank you also for all of you who participating through the virtual. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, in 2020, when the global health system, in this case, hit hard by this pandemic, the global health system also successfully mobilized to initiate financing arrangement to support the initial COVID-19 response. This was done through rapid and massive mobilization of financing by all government using mostly the fiscal tools, supported by monetary tools, but also the participation of the international financial institution. But this mobilization also underscores the lack of preparedness of global as well as regional financing institutions, as well as national government to adequately respond to health emergency like the pandemic COVID-19. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed the vulnerability of health system globally, as mentioned by Bapak Presiden Jokowi, including our ability to adequately absorb the shock from public health emergency like pandemic, which is devastating, of course, from a human point of view, but also from the economic point of view. Estimated around 12 trillion the cost of this pandemic to the economy. For many low and middle income countries, the pandemic has exposed also the chronic underinvestment in critical health infrastructure, human resources, surveillance, laboratory, and also diagnostic system. This is also exposing the weaknesses of the primary health care system that actually could help country to be better handling with any new pandemic that surely is going to attack us again. The resource constraint for many low and middle income countries has been actually in a very severe constraint. They have to choose between the area which is strategically important, like health system, or using for many other priority, including infrastructure development. So when the pandemic hit the countries, that's creating the global risk. Because when the world facing with the pandemic, we can only successfully overcome it when all countries are ready and have the ability to address the issue of pandemic. Given health is a global public good, this means that international financing must still play a very important role in supporting low and middle income countries so that they are going to be better prepared for future health shocks. But in this, there's been lack of focus or little focus on how the international financing could be established, and especially also combining between public and private in building the public health system. It is critical for any international financing effort to motivate as well as to increase the allocation of their budget for strengthening public health system. The public as well as private sector, they actually can complement each other, not crowding out. Considering the recent experience from this pandemic, the leaders in Rome Declaration has already mandating Minister of Finance and Health to continue working so that the world have the ability to better prepare and respond when the next pandemic is going to hit the world. Through many of the meetings, and I really in this case would like to express my appreciation to many of the support coming from you all. Many deliberation, months of intense discussion on how we are going to design this financial intermediary facility and how to operationalize that, with a lot of warning that we should strengthen WHO role and strengthening the global health architecture. We are now reaching the moment in which we have successfully established financial intermediary fund. This is the funding for pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response, which we are now called as pandemic fund. This is not an easy task, given at the same time during the Indonesia presidency, many countries is in a first that they cannot meet physically, as well as the development of the geopolitics. It's creating additional challenge for all of us to work together. So many of you, we just meet today, is actually a strong supporter and believer that the world should be better prepared for the next pandemic. The G20 Joint Finance Health Task Force is also the mechanism for us to be able to deliver the tasks which is mandated by our leader. The task force, with the support from the Secretariat, has been instrumental in completing the mandate from our leaders, and the supporting from World Bank and World Health Organization are instrumental. Through the task force, the G20 has played a very important role in the development and the design of this fund. This process will still continue. We still have a lot of homework that need to be done. But establishing pandemic fund is underscoring how important that the communication as well as collaboration that need to be maintained regardless the differences, and how we should be able to look and agree on what is most important in preparing the world for the next pandemic attack. We have 20 contributors for this pandemic fund. Those countries who's the founding countries for this fund, as well as 3 philanthropists. And last night, on our second and last meeting between Joint Finance and Health, we also heard a couple of new countries which is they are promising or they are going to announce their contribution to this pandemic fund. So we are actually extremely encouraged by this development. The amount that so far has been accumulated, 1.4 billion, is just the starting figures. As President Jokowi mentioned earlier, the estimated need is up to 31 billion US dollar. But this is not the one and the only instrument which is related to the health system preparedness and also improving the health system globally. So this fund definitely is going to work together with other instruments in order for us to be able to develop our ability to prepare better for the pandemic. The pandemic fund, hence, is become the catalytic fund for further long-term support from all bilateral as well as multilateral institutions. We do hope also the participation from philanthropic as well as private sector can be continued encouraged. As I have already mentioned, that this is not only the G20 initiative, this is the global concern. And that's why we are also delighted that many countries outside the G20 also participating in contributing to this pandemic fund. And we will have to continue build the inclusive governance, as also mentioned by all G20 members last night, and also strengthening the international health architecture. Ladies and gentlemen, with the launching of this pandemic fund, which is a very important milestone for all of us. This will provide a starting point for all of us to demonstrate to the world that G20 is able to produce a concrete action that can have a global impact. With the leadership of the G20, and especially from many of you, my colleague, Minister of Finance, who attended this afternoon, as well as those who also attended virtually, we have the confidence that the G20 could also deliver many other concrete results, given the risk from the global economic situation is continue demand our attention. With that, I would like to express our appreciation, Indonesia holding this presidency, using this platform as well as the presidency responsibility. We would like to express our appreciation and thank you for all of your support, whether this is from all the G20 members, invited countries, international organizations, and especially for the WHO and World Bank, who work tirelessly closely together with many major countries to be able to establish this fund. Thank you so much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Ibu Sri Mulyani, for the welcoming remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now move to the next agenda. A second remark from the President of World Bank Group. We would like to invite virtually the President of World Bank Group, Mr. David Malpass. To Mr. Malpass, the screen is yours.
Thank you, President Widodo and Minister Sri Mulyani, for your leadership, and Dr. Tedros for your coordination on this initiative. I'm now on my way to Bali, and I look forward to seeing you soon. It's great that today we are formally presenting the Pandemic Fund. We meet at a time of multiple crises: climate change, food, fuel, inflation, debt, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. This new dedicated fund is an important tool that will support low and middle income countries and regions to become better prepared for global health crises. Moreover, we expect it will incentivize countries to prioritize their agenda and increase their own efforts. I thank the founding donors for their leadership and generous seed contributions. I'm encouraged that over $1.4 billion has already been committed by 24 donors, and I understand that additional pledges are forthcoming. I urge all countries to contribute to the fund. The Pandemic Fund is a testament to the possibility of global coordination. The fund was championed by Italy and Indonesia during their respective G20 presidencies. The World Bank was pleased to support these efforts and help build consensus through evidence-based analysis and lessons from good practice and many years of experience. Together with our G20 partners, the founding donors, WHO, civil society organizations, and other stakeholders, we were able to develop the fund at record speed. We are pleased to host the Secretariat and to serve as the fund's trustee and as an implementing entity. Through dedicated investments in pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response, the Pandemic Fund can help make the world safer. Its very nature contributes to a global public good with benefits that are shared by all across borders. Every dollar we mobilize for the fund that can be invested now in low and middle income countries will save lives and reduce costs for the world for years to come. I'm happy that the Pandemic Fund's governance and operational structure is grounded in the spirit of shared responsibilities that need to address global public goods. First, the fund's governance is agile and inclusive by representing contributors, co-investors, and civil society. Second, the operating structure is flexible to deliver support to countries and regions through existing institutions and therefore complements their work and draws on their comparative advantages. And third, the fund's structure incorporates high standards of transparency and accountability. The health, economic, and social ripple effects of COVID-19 are a stark reminder that preparedness is vital. We've seen millions of lives lost and severe reversals in development. We cannot afford to let this happen again. The Pandemic Fund provides an opportunity to do things differently by helping countries, regions, and the world be stronger in the face of global threats. Thank you all, and see you in Bali soon.
Thank you, Mr. Malpass, for the remark. We will now move to the next agenda. The third remark from the Director General of the WHO. We would like to invite virtually the Director General of WHO, Mr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus. To Mr. Tedros, the screen is yours.
Terima kasih. First, I would like to thank His Excellency President Widodo for his message. Your Excellency Sri Mulyani, Your Excellency Minister Budi Sadiki, and my friend President of the World Bank, David Malpass, Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends. Good morning from Geneva, and I'm delighted to join you for this historic moment. I would particularly like to thank Minister Mulyani and the government of Indonesia for your leadership in creating the Pandemic Fund as a key part of your G20 presidency. I also thank Italy for its work last year with Indonesia to form and chair the G20 Joint Finance Health Task Force for Pandemic Preparedness and Response. I also thank Saudi Arabia for beginning the relay of discussions on pandemic financing under its G20 presidency in 2020. And I welcome and thank our founding donors, co-investor countries, implementing partners, and civil society representatives. I would like to say a special thank you to our colleagues from WHO and the World Bank, especially Bruce, Priya, Scott, Magnus, and Mamta. You have all played a vital role in bringing us to this point and will continue to be essential for the success of the fund. We all know that the COVID-19 pandemic has been a seismic shock to global health and the global economy. But we also know that this will not be the last pandemic. The next one is a matter of when, not if. The effects of climate change, urbanization, and deforestation all mean that the frequency, severity, and economic impact of epidemics and pandemics are only going to get bigger unless we take concerted and coordinated action as one global community. The suffering and loss we have all endured will be in vain unless we learn the painful lessons that COVID-19 is teaching us and put in place the measures to make the world safer. There have been multiple reviews of the global response to the pandemic, with more than 300 recommendations. At the request of our member states, in May this year, WHO published a white paper with 10 key proposals for strengthening the global architecture for health emergency preparedness, response, and resilience. Importantly, our member states have affirmed that the international health regulations must remain the foundation of that architecture, supplemented by a new international accord, which, as you know, countries are now negotiating. A recurring theme of the reviews and one of our 10 key proposals is to create a new fund to provide catalytic and gap-filling funding for pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. The vital role of the pandemic fund will be to rapidly close critical gaps in core capacities for implementing the international health regulations globally, regionally, and nationally. Crucially, countries must be in the driver's seat. The fund's primary aim must be to support national plans to close the gaps that countries themselves identify and to mobilize domestic commitment and financing. This will require careful analysis and prioritization, which will be the hardest job for the board and the technical advisory panel. As a custodian of the international health regulation, WHO looks forward to playing its central coordinating role as chair of the technical advisory panel and in providing technical leadership and guidance to the board. My thanks again to Indonesia and Italy and to all of you for everything you have done to bring us to this point. But this is just the beginning. Now we must work with urgency to issue the first call for proposals by the end of the year, to capitalize the fund adequately and to fulfill the fund's purpose for making the world safer. WHO is totally committed to playing our part to make the fund a success and to build a healthier, safer, fairer future for all the people of the world. Thank you so much again. This is very historic. We're very happy. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Mr. Tedros, for the remark. We will now move to the next agenda, the last remark from the World Bank Managing Director of Operations. We would like to invite to the podium the World Bank Managing Director of Operations, Mr. Axel van Trotsenburg. To Mr. Trotsenburg, the stage is yours.
Thank you, President Widodo, Mr. Srimulyani, Mr. Budi. Thank you for your leadership on establishing the Pandemic Fund. I'm very happy to join here in Bali for the launch of this fund, which will be hosted by the World Bank, but will be operated together with the WHO. In that context, I really would like to thank Dr. Tedros for the great collaboration we have had with the WHO. Would also like to thank Bruce, who is here, and Mike, who are here in the room, for a great collaboration. I think the establishment of this fund is actually very good news worldwide, because this initiative demonstrates what multilateral cooperation can still achieve. And I think here Italy and Indonesia provided critical leadership under their respective G20 presidencies. I also would like to really thank Secretary Madam Secretary Yellen for her constant encouragement to set up this fund, with speed, to do it right, and to get it done. And I think we got it done, Madam Secretary, I think in record time. Thank you. I also would say I would like to really thank for the pledges that were made by 24 countries. This was record. I've been on the fundraising business. This is not easy, and we got that. And a particular thank you to the two largest donors who made a great effort was the United States and the European Union. Thank you for this. As also David mentioned already in his remarks, it was speed that created this, but it was not compromising quality. We got a very good structure in place, but what I think this fund also shows is that the speed required an enormous amount of consultations and collaboration and focus. And I think that established this fund. And what we will need for the implementation is also speed and long-term commitment to this. It cannot be just shortly, but it will need this international collaboration in order to be better prepared for the next pandemic. And I think what Dr. Tedros just mentioned in his contribution, ownership by countries will be key, as well as incentives. It will require incentives as well as payments and dedication of resources by the countries themselves, but it could also be important to complement these resources by this pandemic fund. So therefore, again, this collaboration and this jointness will be key for the success. In short, I think the pandemic fund really offers a real opportunity to do things differently. We need to stay focused on it, and we have to stay focused on this in the long term. And I think we are off to a good start. Next year will be the year of implementation. The call for proposals is coming, and I think we hope to be able to report next year on the first cases in which we are working with partner countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Schwarzenberg, for the remark. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now move to the main program of this event, high-level panel on pandemic PPR. Our speakers for today's high-level seminar are U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, Madam Janet Yellen, Minister of Economy and Finance of Italy, Mr. Giancarlo Giorgetti, Vice Minister of National Health Commission of the People's Republic of China, Professor Xiao Shu-tao, Secretary of Ministry of Health and Family Welfare of India, Mr. Rajesh Bhushan, Deputy Director General for Economic and Financial Affairs, European Commission, Ms. Elena Flores-Gual, World Bank Managing Director of Operations, Mr. Axel van Trotsenberg, and co-chair of the Pandemic Fund, Dr. Khatib Basri. All presentation and discussion will be moderated by Executive Head of the Pandemic Fund Secretariat, Ms. Priya Basu. Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome our moderator today, Ms. Priya Basu. Hi, Ms. Priya Basu. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. May I invite the panelists to please join me on stage. U.S. Treasury Secretary Dr. Janet Yellen, World Bank Managing Director for Operations Dr. Axel van Trotsenberg, Deputy Director General for Economic and Financial Affairs, Ms. Elena Flores, Dr. Khatib Basri, former Finance Minister of Indonesia and co-chair of the Pandemic Fund Board. And we're also joined virtually by the Italy Minister of Economy and Finance, Mr. Giancarlo Giorgetti, by China's Vice Minister of the National Health Commission, Professor Chao Xuetao, by India's Secretary for Health and Family Welfare, Mr. Rajesh Bhushan. So good afternoon, everyone. It really is my honor to moderate this high-level panel on the launch of the Pandemic Fund. And we're thrilled to have with us a really star-studded panel. Thank you all so much for making the time to join us. Our distinguished panelists need no further introduction. Over the next 70 minutes or so, we will hear from our panelists on why the Pandemic Fund was created, why it's needed, what promise it offers, and what they would like to see it accomplished. We will have time for 2 rounds of questions and interventions, and then a last rapid-fire round. This event is being live-streamed, and we have people joining and watching from all over the world. Please use the hashtag Pandemic Fund on social media of your choice to participate on online conversations. So without further ado, let me just start. If I may start with you, Secretary Yellen. The United States was an early supporter of the Pandemic Fund. Can you talk about why you felt so strongly that such a fund was needed?
Well, thank you so much for that question, Priya. And first, thanks to the Indonesian presidency for organizing this event and for creating the opportunity to celebrate what I think is an historic achievement together. We all know the steep price we have paid in human lives and in economic hardship in the nearly 3 years since the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic. And we're also just beginning to understand some of its longer-term impacts and societal costs, such as the detrimental impact it has had on the learning outcomes of our children. So even as we recover from COVID-19, countries around the world are dealing with other outbreaks, monkeypox, Ebola, and doing their best to hold at bay the rise of new COVID variants. Public health issues are simply not going away, so addressing them is critical to our well-being. And that's why at the very first Global COVID Summit that President Biden hosted in September of 2021, Vice President Harris actually called for the establishment of a financial intermediary fund that would be focused solely on strengthening pandemic preparedness. Having now pledged $450 million to this fund, the United States is demonstrating the importance of preparation before the next pandemic, instead of reacting after it unfolds. The Pandemic Fund is a new and vital tool to help prepare for future pandemics that could threaten lives and livelihoods everywhere around the world. And I think crucially, the fund will help catalyze additional investments in pandemic preparedness and enhance coordination among key partners. Just taking a step back, let me just reflect on the importance of the G20's efforts and its role in the multilateral system. We're gathering here at a difficult time with significant tensions among G20 members given Russia's war in Ukraine. And it's easy for commentators to question the effectiveness of this forum. But I would challenge that notion. I think the G20 is most important in times of crisis. And amid the current confluence of events, it's easy to overlook the significance of the achievements in health over the last 2 years. This group came together in the midst of the largest global health crisis in a century to take concrete steps to be better prepared for the next one. And it wasn't always easy, but in the end, this group has played a significant role in delivering concrete outcomes. Well, it's just a start, and there's a long way to go. I'm proud of what we have accomplished to improve coordination among finance and health officials, which was a key gap in the global health architecture, through the G20 Finance and Health Task Force and the establishment of the Pandemic Fund. And I think the steps we've taken this year will help deliver on the vision of a healthier, more responsive, and more robust global health architecture. And this is exactly the type of response the world expects from the G20, an example of what the G20 can deliver.
Thank you so much, Secretary Yellen. If I may turn to Minister Giorgetti, who's joining us virtually. Minister Giorgetti, Italy co-chaired with Indonesia the G20 Finance and Health Task Force, which provided a forum for robust discussions on why strengthening global health security is an investment in the future. Can you share with us your perspective on the investment case for the pandemic fund? Do we have Minister Giorgetti?
Marking a very important moment in making the world more resilient to future pandemics. Indonesia can be very proud, not just of its leadership in supporting the creation of the fund, but also of organizing an excellent event. As you mentioned, Italy has put significant effort towards this. First, as a G20 presidency, and then supporting Indonesia's G20 presidency as co-chairs the task force. Italy has a long history of giving impulse to important initiatives in global health. Back in 2001, as G8 presidency, we were involved in the establishment of the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. In 2009, again as a G8 presidency, we led the creation of the Advanced Market Commitment, an instrument to introduce innovative vaccines against the pneumococcus. Those investments paid off. The MSC experience was invaluable in allowing the creation of COVAX, a critical tool to ensure access to new COVID-19 vaccines for all countries at the same time, which is run by the Gavi Alliance. Under Italy's presidency, the G20 has given critical impetus to ensure equitable distribution of COVID-19 medical countermeasures, promoting all the existing multilateral activities. Finally, in my previous role, I have personally been a strong supporter of the establishment of the important project of common European interest in the field of health. Overcoming market failures and pushing the boundaries of innovation through public-private partnership will bring positive spillovers, not just as for a European economy, but also for global health. At the same time, it was clear that dealing with the current pandemic was not sufficient. The events of 2020 showed all.
Thank you very much, Minister Giorgetti. If I can turn to Professor Chow, who is joining us from China. Are you able to hear us, Professor Chow? Great. So China is a founding donor of the Pandemic Fund. It would be great to hear from you reflecting on your lessons from COVID-19, why you believe this fund is needed.
Distinguished ministers, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to participate in the launching of the Pandemic Fund. China would congratulate Indonesia on your leadership demonstrated during your G20 presidency in 2022 and on the successful establishment and operation of the Pandemic Fund. The current COVID-19 pandemic has exposed technical and funding gaps globally in pandemic PPR, as well as uneven access to VTD, vaccines, testing, and diagnostics. In order to fill the above-mentioned gaps, China believes it is imperative to establish a dedicated and sustainable source of funding for global pandemic PPR. China believes the fund is an important measure to implement the consensus of G20 Leaders Summit. It will help meet the urgent needs of developing countries in the health sector, while helping them enhance their capabilities in response to major public health emergencies. The fund is expected to help ensure the central role of WHO in global health governance, fully mobilize all sources of funding, and jointly safeguard life and health of mankind. At the same time, the purpose of the fund is in great alignment with the Global Development Initiative proposed by President Xi Jinping at the 76th UNGA. China hopes the fund will become a useful complement to existing public health financing mechanisms without fragmentation and duplication, with a view to enhancing global capabilities in response to major public health emergencies, to make positive contribution to health and well-being of mankind, and to build towards a community of shared health for mankind. China is ready to work with all the other G20 members to ensure the long-term success of the fund. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My next question is to Secretary Bhushan from India. Secretary Bhushan, are you able to hear us?
Yes.
In your view, what gap in the global health architecture does the pandemic fund fill?
Thank you, Priya, and esteemed panelists, as well as distinguished delegates who are there physically. The first thing that we must remember is that COVID-19 pandemic has indeed been the biggest test of the global health and financial system of the century. It has brought to the fore the need for effective convergence between health and finance and the need to invest in pandemic PPR. So what is needed is collective action to augment global health security, supported by domestic and international funding. What is also needed is an empowered and sustainably financed WHO at the center of the global health architecture. Launch of the pandemic fund with about 1.4 billion funding pledges is a positive milestone in our collective efforts. And I take this opportunity to place on record our deep appreciation and commendation of the Indonesian presidency as well as the Italian leadership prior to that in this regard. The fund will support in building sustainable and resilient global health systems to combat future pandemics. The uniqueness of this fund lies in its inclusive governance framework and its focus on pandemic preparedness, prevention, and response. Future health emergencies may occur anytime. Hence, plugging the gaps in pandemic PPR, including developing global surveillance, research, and development of medical countermeasures, and building IHR core capacities should remain a priority area going ahead. Preventive and preparedness strategies are low cost and high impact in terms of return on investment. Therefore, it is critical to look beyond the current pandemic and focus on building capacities at all levels for pandemic prevention, preparedness, and resilience, particularly in LMICs and MICs. History has taught us that peacetime should be utilized for building suitable networks and nurturing partnerships so as to have adequate systems in place. Research and development and manufacturing hubs for medical countermeasures, along with a global coordination platform, needs to be prioritized. Pandemic Fund, we believe, in active collaboration with G20, should facilitate establishing an end-to-end global medical countermeasure coordinating platform. Thank you, Priya.
Thank you very much. That's a lot of food for thought and for us to think about as the Pandemic Fund designs its first call for proposals. May I turn to Elena Flores now? Elena, the European Commission has been a strong supporter of the Pandemic Fund. What, in your view, are the main ways in which the fund can add value?
Thank you very much. Thanks, Priya, for the question. And well, first of all, thanks to the Indonesian presidency for having been really driving this until today. This is really a great success, and thanks also to the previous Italian presidency for the same support. And we are now here with having a very good deliverable. Now, the question about the value added. You will remember that the need for a fund to address systemic risk and for deadly and costly epidemics or pandemics was already discussed at the time of the Ebola epidemic in 2014-16. However, the COVID-19 brought to the fore really the urgent need of collective action to prevent, detect, and rapidly respond to pandemics. And as has been many times said, and we all know this is not going to be the last one, so it's really critical that we are in a position to mobilize financing in an effective and equitable manner in order to be better prepared for the next pandemic. Now, we have been committed, the European Commission and the European Union, since the very beginning. We have been a strong supporter because we really believe. We believe that there is a need for a financial intermediary fund, and we really believe that this is going to provide strong value added. And this is the reason why we have been in a position to mobilize $450 million as a first contributor together with the US. So that demonstrates our conviction that this fund is going to provide value added. First, where we see the value added. First, because we think that the fund is going to fill existing gaps in the architecture. And we think that it is very important that this funding is going to be sustained. And it can be sustained over the medium term, because that operation requires time. And we have to make sure that these funds are there in order to support that. And this is important because it will be providing value added, as it has been said, as a catalyst to support also existing initiatives. So we see a complementarity and a role to reinforce other existing capacities. Second, we think the fund, by complementing and reinforcing the WHO in its normative and technical role, will provide also very important value added. And here we see that the fund is also a tool in order to make sure that other resources are not deviated for their purpose, so that the development resources remain to be used for what they have to be used. And here we have a supplementary fund in order to reinforce the pandemic preparedness. Third, we think that it is important because it has a leverage function. So we think that the fund can really mobilize other public and private financing, which is absolutely necessary to make this a success. And the principle of inclusivity and the participation of co-investors on a balanced footing with donors in the governance is key for that objective. And finally, we think that this creation of the fund provides really a momentum, a political, economic, and social attention that needs to be given to strengthening health systems. And for that reason is why we think it's so important that G20 remains in the driving seat to keep this political push and political momentum going forward. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you for that. So let me turn next to Dr. Van Trotzenberg. The World Bank has been instrumental in developing the Pandemic Fund. Can you talk about why it's needed in your perspective?
Well, I think to think about this fund is really to think about the cost. The world was ill prepared for this COVID crisis. And we have paid a terrible price in terms of human loss. But we should also keep in mind that we have been making constantly progress in reducing extreme poverty. And now we have again an increase of extreme poverty. And there's over 100 million people. We should never forget that. There were hundreds of millions of kids out of school.
Many are staying out of school permanently, particularly girls. It has been long-term cost on development. That is not acceptable. So I think that we can say that these crises, unfortunately, may again come. So complacency is no longer an option. And as Elena said, there were discussions maybe of Ebola. And maybe one of the problems was Ebola didn't affect the whole world. And therefore, we couldn't get that off the ground. COVID has changed the logic. And therefore, I think this fund isn't a direct response. It was overdue, and we need it. It is a complement to, of course, healthcare system strengthening, but it provides a very sharp focus on preparedness, not for today, it is permanently. Secondly, it is the challenge to all, meaning the domestic effort has to be central, including on financing, but it should be complemented by external support. And that external support is what this fund tries to capture. It can provide critically needed seed money to complement it, and then we can provide also sharing with best practices. That's the reason that this fund provides also a wonderful new opportunity of collaboration with the WHO, with other UN agencies, with bilateral agency. Nobody has it all, the package. We'll need to complement each other where everyone is sitting. And that is, I think, where is the strength of this FIF is coming from. It is together. But I think we need always to keep in mind that the human loss and the fact that we saw again increase in absolute poverty, extreme poverty, that is an unacceptable notion, and we have to address that.
Thank you. Let me turn to Dr. Basri. Dr. Basri, can you tell us your perspective of how this fund can help, what role it has to play?
Well, thank you very much, Priya. First of all, I would like to thank the G20 and Indonesia and Italy presidency to make this pandemic fund happen. But back to your question, I think very similar like Axel. One thing that we learned from this COVID-19 pandemic is we realized that health is an investment. It's not only spending or consumptions that we need, it's really input for the economic activities. Yeah, so once the health system collapsed, then we realized that how the economy collapsed as well. So the COVID-19 pandemic gave a very good lesson learned for us about the preparation, anticipation for if there will be a sort of like a pandemic in the future. Now, perhaps we can look at whether we are ready for that. And we have to be honest that the current global financing is ill-equipped to provide security from the pandemics, and also fragmented, siloed, inefficient, ad hoc, and unpredictable. So under this kind of situation, financing prevention is particularly weak. That is why we need to establish a sort of like an institution to address this issue. We do understand that the WHO play a very central role in the global health. But the WHO itself is not a funding agency. So that is why we need to collaboration with the institution like World Bank. Yeah, that's the reason why this establishment of this pandemic fund somehow could bridge the issue of the sustainability of the funding and also the addressing the concern of the pandemic on the other side. And I think this pandemic fund has a unique role to making the world safer because it is investment in the global public goods. And as President Malpass mentioned in his remarks, investment on strengthening the pandemic prevention response in low and middle income countries, these will save millions of lives and also money in the future. And the way we look at it, this decision is not only that, I think this is the first time that the international community come together to invest on fundings for the prevention, preparedness, and response in developing countries. So this is something that very important. This is the testament of the multilateralism in the midst of many doubt about the issue of the multilateralism at this moment. So with that, I think this is a very important milestone and achievement. And I would like to say also to, in addition